moving over to video number 2 now. I'm really distracted by there's a big tree outside my window and someone's putting a Christmas tree up and it's distracting me. Try not to look out the window. Okay, so so as I was saying in the previous video, euphemisms reinforce the implication that disability is a negative state when it's not, in and of itself. A negative state, it's just part of being human, obviously, you know what I mean. And there's also the potential for terms such as special needs, differently abled. I would also even add neurodivergent into that as well, by the way, because I personally think that neurodivergent is another euphemism, part of the euphemistic treadmill. The euphemistic treadmill is when people constantly create new words to essentially avoid saying the word disabled, but then each word that comes along that begins out as like acceptable or politically correct because of politically correct in inverted commas, because actually I'll say it's reactionary not to use the word disabled, but people think it's basically pseudo-political correctness. It's actually, pseudo-politically correctness because people are uncomfortable with the word disability. But each word that comes along eventually becomes tarnished. Because the stigma, as I say, the stigma does not go, it just jumps ship onto the new word. Stigma is incredibly adhesive, it just sticks. And actually and the stigma just grows. It grows and grows and grows. It becomes more adhesive the more you avoid facing the facts. It's like you're trying to hide it. The elephant in the room, so to speak, disability, is still there. By trying to pretend it's not there, you're just increasing the stigma and the negative associations. You might as well just look reality squarely in the face and say the word. That's the hashtag. Say the word. I'd say actually neurodivergence is another euphemism, and I can't stand the term neurodivergence because it's no... you don't need to kind of think too deeply to understand what it is. It's just another word to try and avoid saying the word disability. It's no different to special needs or any of these other words. And there's a potential for these terms to undermine the social justice goals. As I said in the previous video, disability has a long pedigree, is associated with collective struggle, which we should be very proud of. We should be proud of that collective struggle. I'm not proud of being disabled, but you can be proud of the collective struggle, the struggle for justice, as I say. So, by disability rights movement, by avoiding saying this word, you're actually undermining that social justice movement by erasing disability and pretending it doesn't exist. You're allowing governments to make cuts. It's very reactionary, very neoliberal, very right-wing to do that. By making disability sound more positive, that's what I'm saying. By making disability sound more positive, as if the reality of social oppression has been erased. I would say, I don't want to go into this now, but I'm someone who, my position is the biopsychosocial model. So I do think, disability obviously has a social component. Obviously, how society is structured can make life more or less difficult for someone with a disability. But I also feel that we mustn't ignore the innate medical side either. Like, whatever society I'm in, I'm always going to be disabled, which is why I say the biomedical social model. But social oppression is big. Like, the way the Tories in the UK are currently trying to cut welfare and so on, which is just an extra stress we don't need. It's not our fault we're disabled, it's not like a sin, we haven't committed a crime, so why should we have to suffer for the rest of our days? Why should we be punished? So that's one of those things where erasing disability is really unhelpful, particularly in the current climate. No replacement word can eradicate discrimination that's faced by the disability community. So, the hashtag #SayTheWord campaign was created by people with disability to claim the term and educate the general public about identity erasure. Yet, a common sentiment toward disabled people is, I don't think of you as disabled. These efforts to avoid using the word disability paradoxically reveal the actual prejudices and biases against people with disability. you know, like, I don't think of you as disabled. Well, that's like basically almost like it's a false compliment, and the only reason they think of it as a compliment is because they think disability is a bad thing. Disability is not a bad thing. That's what SayTheWord is all about. It's like reclaiming a word, disability identity, social justice campaign. Disability, part of being human, is not a bad thing. It's not something that you need to kind of remove or hold at arm's length, like, yeah, untouchable, you know, oh, we mustn't touch it, it's dirty. You need to create some other word to pretend it doesn't exist. There's actually a word for that, by the way. I don't think of you as disabled. Able-splaining. I don't know if you've heard of mansplaining, which is when a man sort of looks down at a woman and kind of tells the woman about womanhood in a sort of very patriarchal, condescending way. It's like mansplaining. Able-splaining is the same thing, but where a non-disabled person tries to tell a disabled person about their own experience, like saying, oh, I don't think of you as disabled, you know. That's able-splaining. It actually shows a profound lack of understanding. It's not very cool to say that, you know. Expressions of surprise upon learning about disabled people's accomplishments or denial of disability are microaggressions, which are basically covert social experiences that subtly insult the recipient. The implication is that disability is negative, and an individual that defies the undesirable stereotypes the implication is that disability is negative, and the individual defies the undesirable stereotypes held by the observer. You know. So, it also, interestingly, it says that self-identification as disabled is believed to be essential to the formation of positive disability identity and better well-being. But the perception of stigma can make someone not want to identify as disabled. So the implication here being that when someone actually positively identifies as disabled, you know, once they start to understand how disability is situated in a wider social justice movement, and actually you can build a positive identity based upon that, you know, as part of this history of collective struggle, that then leads to better mental health. Whereas if you kind of internalise the ableism of society, that disability is somehow a bad thing, and you see yourself sort of isolated as an individual, the neoliberal idea of everyone, you know, just being an isolated individual, not connected to any movement or anything like that, that can actually increase mental ill health. Using euphemisms to pretend something doesn't exist is like denying reality. That in and of itself can increase mental ill health. I know this only too well because back when I saw disability as a negative thing, because at one point I'd internalised all that ableism, it was bad for my mental health, but that was before I understood about the disability rights movement and everything like that, and that disability isn't a bad thing. Using euphemisms, I feel, is really not helpful. Which is why it's funny when I was once told not to see myself as disabled, and I was given this lecture, this able-splaining, one time by a psychologist who I actually lectured her in the end about why she was wrong, and I felt quite empowered doing that, so I wasn't going to take that. But yeah, some able-splaining about, I shouldn't see it as it was when I was trying to explain to her, actually, I do see that I do have a disorder, and why I don't think that's a bad thing, because there are lots of things that you can have that are a disorder. It doesn't make you wrong as a person or anything. And she was trying to tell me about maybe I need to change my perception and stuff, which was a clear case. I didn't know the language back then, but that was a clear case of both able-splaining and gaslighting. I wasn't going to take that. But yeah, that's the whole problem. It's all because the non-disabled able person feels uncomfortable. Well, that's not my problem if they feel uncomfortable. My reality is my reality. I'm not going to let someone else try and tell me how I experience things. And actually, I would say for someone who is disabled, I have fairly good self-esteem, probably because I face reality. I look reality in the face and I don't try to hide things. Because I see it as it is. I'm not going to whitewash things. I'm not going to pretend things are better than they are. It's actually bad for your mental health to do that. What was I saying? So, yeah. Now, people with severe and obviously apparent disabilities tend to more readily self-identify as disabled, perhaps as they have no option to pass and are likely marginalised in multiple ways. And yeah, maybe that's why I don't have a problem with the word disabled, because I am so obviously disabled. Like, I know, like, to some other people I might not immediately come across as disabled. Oh, you don't look disabled, someone might say. But but I am obviously, I can't work, for example, and I'm on benefits. It's like, it's obvious I'm disabled, you know what I mean? But it says that maybe someone who doesn't feel themselves to be that disabled, like maybe they've got a relatively good job, or things like that, are maybe more likely to deny disability. Maybe use euphemisms and things like that because of internalised ableism and stuff. I don't know. Removing disability can increase internalised stigma and shame by validating a negative connotation of the word. And loss of the term disability risks diminished visibility as well. For example, waning services. In a 2016 study, researchers found people who are referred to as having special needs are actually seen more negatively than those referred to as having a disability. The needs are not special, they're the same human needs everyone else has. By saying special needs, it kind of suggests that that it's like some special entitlement or something, which could potentially result in negative attitudes towards them from other people. By the way, the person who created the hashtag SayTheWord is someone called Lawrence Carter Long. He's an American with cerebral palsy. He's a person who coined the hashtag SayTheWord, because the word disabled connects members of a community to each other and their common history. Special needs, the euphemism, has become a dysphemism, which is a derogatory term as opposed to a softer one. And that's what tends to happen with euphemisms over time. They end up becoming dysphemisms and the stigma sticks, but it also becomes enhanced via the euphemism. Euphemisms tend to attract stigma, whereas the word disability obviously has stigma attached to it, but because it's a kind of more factual term, it's calling a spade, and because it's got a long history connected to it of struggle, collective struggle, it actually is less stigmatising, all in all. But because whatever word you use is going to be stigma, using euphemisms just kind of increases the stigma. You think you've got rid of the stigma, you haven't. You've just increased the stigma, and a euphemism tends to become a dysphemism over time, which is very unlikely to happen with the word disability. Special needs makes those who are disabled sound like an extra burden as well. Oh, and the other thing is that the law defines you as disabled as well. The law doesn't define you as special needs, it defines you as disabled as well. So it's also a legal issue as well. So a dysphemism is a euphemism that is more negative than a word it replaces. Special needs itself, they found that using the word special needs in this research study actually makes that people tend to be more, what am I trying to say? That special needs itself